Good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for a new session of Cigna's Wellbeing webinar series, Connect for Health. In fact, this is the fourth in the series, so I do hope that you're enjoying them. For anyone who's joined before, you'll already know that my name is Leah Cottrell. I'm the Chief Distribution Officer of Cigna for the Middle East and Africa. So as the COVID-19 pandemic and its far-reaching implications continue to unfold globally and in our community, we find ourselves trying to navigate a brand new reality. The changes are rapid, they're confusing, and they continue to evolve. Resilience is key to cope, and the heightened levels of stress and anxiety that comes with this unprecedented change has really been brought forward with individuals, with families, and with society, quite frankly. And at a time that everyone's stretched and facing uncertainty, Cigna understands the urgent need of extending our focus on resilience and strategies to enhance it. So by launching this Connect for Health webinar series, Cigna is committed to bringing you peace of mind during this current situation and helping you to prioritize your health and well-being. The challenge, as well as the opportunity, of course, is now to start the process of thinking about our new normal. Even though many economies and businesses have resumed their normal routines again, there are still many restrictions in place, and we're facing fundamental shifts in the way that we conduct our lives. At a time where many of us are facing competing pressures and mounting anxiety, it's important for us to take space to consider our own well-being. Therefore, at Cigna, we want to help you make this transition as smooth as possible by providing you with the right tools and resources to manage stress and optimize performance. Today's session, which I'm super excited about, is part 2 of the Peak Performance series. And it's going to help explore how we can use stress as rocket fuel to motivate ourselves, to propel ourselves into higher levels of performance, and to establish a successful routine. So without any further delay, I'd like to introduce Victoria Tipper from Victoria Tipper Nutrition and Life Coaching to take us through the session. Thank you again, Victoria. Over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session, and thank you for that introduction, Leah. So I think we're just going to go straight into the presentation. Let's talk about Peak Performance Part 2. Thanks. So thank you so much for those who joined last week, and thanks for joining today. So today, before we go in, sorry about that. So before we go into it, I'm just going to go over what actually was spoken about in last week's presentation for anyone who didn't join, but just as a reminder for people that did join. So part 1, we looked at how it's so important for growth that we have just a manageable amount of stress and that we prioritize rest. And that stress is actually that opportunity for us to grow and become a better version of ourselves. And also how important it is to check in with the quality of our inner thoughts, looking at those limiting beliefs with a lot of us do have, and how we need to replace those with those performance enhancing beliefs. So today, we're going to talk about something a bit different, but moving on that peak performance. We're going to first look at how we need to really focus the focus needs to be on energy management for high performance. It's less about time management. There's a bit of that as well, but it's really about energy management and how our routines and rituals when we're designing our day are the things that are going to make massive changes in terms of performance. And how when you do something is actually important, and that's connected to your chronotype. And then we're going to have a little look at strengths, values, and purpose when it comes to designing the winning week. So let's get into it. So When we're actually striving for excellence, it's really important that we're creating a whole sort of, healthy human being. So we need to make sure that we're nourishing all these different areas of ourselves. So there's actually 4 different ways that we get energy into our life. There's from the body, from our emotions, from our mind, and from our spirit. We think of these as energy well springs. So these are sources that are going to give us that energy. So when we look at the body, we're thinking about nutrition, we're thinking about movement, we're thinking about sleep and rest as well. When we look at emotions, we're looking at, are we holding on to some negative emotions? How emotionally intelligent are we? How in tune with our own emotions are we? How in tune are we with other people's emotions? When we look at the mind, it's that ability to focus on a task, to give it that deep focus, to problem solve. How good are we at doing that? And spirit, this can mean different things to different people, but it's kind of, it might be to do with a divine connection, or it could just be you actually aligning with your values and your sense of purpose in what you're doing on a daily basis. And what we want to do in order to be able to get energy from those 4 different well springs, those 4 sources, we want to make sure we're doing something on a daily basis that feeds into those 4 different areas. So if we think of them as rooms, we want to go into those 4 different rooms on a daily basis so that we have enough energy to be at our best. I really like this quote by Aristotle. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit. And it's so true. It's about those habits and those rituals that we're putting into place on a daily basis. So this is something that was created, and I found it in the Harvard Business Review. It's created by performance psychologists, and they've been working with professional sportsmen and women, and they'd realized that they have certain things in place. And then they thought, okay, let's look at people in the corporate world. And they found that there were certain people, high performers, people who were performing at a high level consecutively. And they found they actually had something in common with your professional sports people. So they were able to feed into those 4 different rooms that I spoke about before. They actually had that energy. They were able to perform under quite a lot of stress and pressure, but at that peak performance. And the secret was that they had these 4 different tiers all working together. So they created this performance pyramid where at the basis or the foundation of that pyramid is our physical well-being. And then that links to our emotional well-being, which then links to our mental capacity and then our spiritual. And what is it that links those different areas of the pyramid together? It's actually our daily rituals. So it's those rituals that we put in place that help to give us that energy and help us with peak performance. So for example, you might have some physical well-being rituals, such as exercising on a regular basis, a specific time of the day. Maybe you're exercising in the morning. That's going to give you a better sort of, hold on your emotional status. And that's then going to actually help with your ability to focus. So it's looking at putting those rituals, fitting them into our daily basis and understanding that in order for us to be at our best, we need to make sure we're looking at each of those different levels and connecting them with our daily rituals. So when it comes to designing the day, we really want to become minimalists to be a maximalist. So if you look at those 3 gentlemen, the late Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, and Barack Obama, I want you to think about what are some of this, what do they have in common? So of course, they're all leaders in their industry, very successful. But something else they had in common was that they all pretty much most days decided to wear the same outfit. And there's a reason behind this. They were actually choosing to remove that daily decision of, oh, what should I wear, to avoid something that we call decision fatigue. Essentially, the way the brain works, the more decisions we need to make throughout the day, the more tired our brains become and the lower the quality of those decisions. So I want you to ask yourself, what are some of the decisions you're making on a daily basis that you can actually remove? Things that maybe aren't as important to you. We can automate certain things. So, for example, a really good tip, just as those gentlemen did, maybe not wearing the same outfit every day, although you can do, but planning your outfit the night before. So you don't have to think about it in the morning. That's removing one decision. So you're going to, your brain won't get so tired. We can also think of automating things like our meals, so you plan what you're going to have on a daily basis. So you're not getting to lunchtime and thinking, oh, what should I have? Should I have this? Should I have that? You've already decided the night before, or maybe you're someone who does meal prepping on a Saturday, or on a Sunday. So you prepare your meals for the week. You can also just think about, activities like exercise, doing certain activities at the same time every day. So we don't have to think about, should I or shouldn't I? It's quite interesting as well, because our willpower is also connected to decision fatigue. So the more times we have to resist things. So they did a study where people had to resist cookies, and afterwards they performed in a test and they just weren't able to perform as well as at high an IQ level. So the idea is, reducing temptation as well is going to be really important. When I was working in an office, there often would be, a plate of chocolates, that I'd have to walk past on a daily basis. So removing that temptation, so you don't have to resist it, is also going to help with decision fatigue. So it's all about automating your life as much as you possibly can. One of the best ways to do that is to organize your morning, to have these morning rituals. If we look at people who are performing at their best, people who have really, really successful, they often will have a specific morning ritual or a number of different rituals that they do. So I would call this, and in a perfect world, you have your power hour. Of course, not everyone has an hour in the morning that they can dedicate to, setting them up for their day. So even if it's a power 10 minutes, even if it's a power 5 minutes, whatever it is, having that time, that sort of buffer zone that is just for you. In a perfect world, this is a time where you would feed into your body, your mind, and your soul. So maybe this is a time where you fit in some exercise. Maybe it's a time where you listen to a podcast as well. Maybe it's a time you do some meditation, or even if it's a time that, if you play an instrument, you start to play an instrument or practice something that you enjoy. But it's a time for you to do something sacred for you. It's also great if we can have a routine that really primes us for our day. So when I say priming us for our day, it's getting our mind into that state of peak performance. So things that really help with clarity. Exercise can be great for that. Meditation can also be great for that, to help us to get into the zone as such. So planning your day, planning your morning rituals is a really, really important start to your day. And again, once you have that morning ritual, it's removing decisions. So you're not having that decision fatigue that we mentioned in the last slide. So, of course, we want to perform our morning rituals. They're going to really help us in terms of success and being at our best. But I also wanted to touch upon how important it is to prime yourself for a specific event. So, for example, a presentation such as what I'm doing now, I will always have a specific routine that I do that gets me into the zone as such, helps me getting into that flow state. So I'm able to perform at my best. So this could be, if you're doing a presentation for work, it might be that you're going into a really important meeting. You've got to make a really important call. It could be that you're about to perform at an event, maybe a bike race, whatever it is. But there are certain things that we can do to prepare us to get into that peak state. And as we say, that flow state. The most important thing is relaxing the mind. We really want to be able to actually slow down our brain waves. So we get into those alpha and theta brain waves, is what they essentially call it when we're in that flow state. This is a great way of doing that, is by doing some form of meditation or some form of deep breathing. So before a presentation, I will always do either some box breathing or I'll do a guided meditation to get me into the zone. We also want to cultivate positivity. It's so important. And avoid that negativity. So when we cultivate positivity, we actually increase activity in the brain for parts that are responsible for creativity and problem solving. And when we're thinking negatively, the opposite occurs. So we shut down that creativity, and we shut down as much of an ability to problem solve. So they found that even watching YouTube videos of cats has helped people to feel more positive, and has helped them to perform better. I'm not saying before a presentation watch cat videos, but I'm saying find what works for you. Each person's routine is going to be different. So find what helps you to get into the zone. It could simply be sitting and having your cup of tea. Whatever it is, it could be like doing some yoga routine, whatever it might be. But breath work is something you can do everywhere and anywhere, and nobody even knows you're doing it. So avoiding that negativity. And the main thing is that consistency is key. So Robin Sharma, one of the leading life coaches, says that consistency is the mother of mastery. So you want to be as consistent as you possibly can. The other thing is, when we practice a specific routine followed by the event, our brain starts to associate with that. So as soon as we start to get into our routine, it helps us get into that flow state. So we really want to look at when we do certain things in the day. So this is all about designing your day and your work schedule in a perfect world, if you can, around your chronotype. So we have different chronotypes. We think of the two main chronotypes. We've got the morning lark and the night owl. You've got about 15% of the population are morning larks. They like to get up really early. They can do their best work in the morning, and they like to go to bed early. You've got your night owls. They like to go to bed. I say they like, but they're genetically programmed to want to go to bed a little bit later. So after midnight, get up a little bit later, and they're going to do their best work later on in the afternoon or early evening. So if we look at the morning larks, that 15%, for example, you've got Michelle Obama, who wakes at 4:30. That is definitely too early for me personally, but that's just genetically what she's programmed to do. By the way, the rest of the population are kind of that third bird. They're those people that are sort of in the middle. So they're in between the lark and the owl. So yeah, if we look at the lark, so if you're somebody that you like to get up really early and go to bed quite early, you're going to do your best task, your best focus, your hardest work earlier on in the morning. We call those the analytic tasks, anything that takes a lot of focus. So, that could be sort of getting, focusing on getting a report done, whatever it is, your most important thing that's going to take a lot of brain power. And then any sort of administrative tasks across the board for everyone, early to mid-afternoon, are going to be good. And those insight tasks, these are things that we want to do when we're more creative. Brainstorming, creating anything. This is also a good time to schedule meetings to go and build on relationships. So for a morning lark, it's better to do that in the late afternoon. If those who attended the presentation last week, I mentioned how when we're doing our deep focus, we're switching off our creativity. But when we rest our brain, that's when we actually activate the part of the brain that's responsible for being creative. So that's why with your morning larks, being creative later on in the day is going to be good. For the night owls, because they're more focused later on, so their peak time is going to be late afternoon or early evening. That's the time, if you're a late owl, that you want to actually be focusing on doing that deep, concentration sort of like work, your most important work, and in the morning to be more creative. How do you find out whether you're a morning lark or a night owl? You can do a test. So there are things that you can do online, but also you can ask yourself this question. If you had nothing to do tomorrow, what time would you naturally want to go to bed at and naturally want to wake up at? If I were to say to you, you have to do a 2-hour test that's going to be really stimulating, really challenging mentally, what time of day would you choose to do it? And also, if you were going to do a 2-hour, something that's going to be really physically challenging, what time of day would you choose to do that? Because also in terms of, like with our deep focus, we want to do our exercise. If you're a lark, you want to do that early in the morning. If you're an owl, you want to be doing that later on in the day. And there are lots of successful night owls as well. Charles Darwin was a night owl, by the way. So I wanted to also talk about, so we've looked at when we want to do things, but I wanted to speak about how we can increase productivity. This is something all of us want to be able to do in order to be the best version of ourselves, to become, those peak performers. So it's quite an interesting name, the Pomodoro technique, and some of you may have heard of it. It was developed in the 80s by an Italian guy, and it was because he found a way to become really productive, and he used a tomato-shaped kitchen timer, hence why he's called it the Pomodoro technique. And what you do is you actually decide on the task that needs to be done. So you have that task, and then you set your timer. So you set an alarm for 25 minutes. Within those 25 minutes, you want to have deep focus. So you want to make sure that you have, remove your phone, I would say, completely from sight, because even seeing our phones causes brain drain. So it actually causes us to perform lower in IQ tests. So yeah, remove your phone, remove any distraction, deep focus for those 25 minutes. After those 25 minutes, you want to actually put a little mark so you've done one Pomodoro, as he calls it, and you take a 5-minute break. In that break, step away from your work. This could be time you make a quick phone call, you go make a cup of tea, get some water, have a little walk, listen to some music, whatever it is, just take 5 minutes. And then you go back, and again, you do another Pomodoro. So you do another 25-minute session of very deep focus work. After that, you take another 5-minute break. In total, you complete 4 sets of 25-minute deep focus sessions. And then after that 4th Pomodoro, that 4th 25 minutes of deep focus on your work, then you take a slightly longer break of 15 to 30 minutes. And you take that break, and again, you do something that's completely unrelated to the work that you're doing. So you're prioritizing that rest, like I spoke about last week. You're making sure you're taking those breaks. So you're stressing yourself just the right amount with a deep focus. Having those breaks, it's going to help you to grow. Remember that equation. And then you can come back and start the Pomodoros again. So it's just really a way to help you become more productive, to have that really deep focus so that you can increase your productivity and become the best version of you. So try the Pomodoro technique. It's also really important when it comes to being at our best, to becoming a peak performer, that we are looking at the people that we surround ourselves with. So we are the product of the 5 people, or we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with. So who are you spending the most time with? It's interesting because emotions and motivation are contagious. We are, as human beings, we are actually tribal sort of creatures. There's something innate within us that wants to be part of a tribe. And that's why we actually have these mirror neurons. So it's built within us. We have these neurons that when we see somebody maybe feeling sad, or if they're feeling happy, or if they're feeling angry, we start to feel empathy for them, and we start to experience those emotions because of those mirror neurons. It also happens with behaviors. So, for example, if one of your friends starts to smoke, it's much more likely that you might start smoking as well. And studies have shown that if one of your friends becomes obese, it increases your risk of obesity by 121%. But equally, if one of your friends starts to go running in the morning, you're much more likely to start taking up running. And if one of your friends, starts to budget or starts to eat more healthily, that also will mean you're more likely to follow those behaviors. So it works both ways. And also, when it comes to motivation, that is contagious. So if you're surrounding yourself by people who are intrinsically motivated, so they're motivated to do things just because of the love of it, because they want to do it, rather than wanting to do things because of it, rewards, or because they're going to look good, or they're going to win a competition. It's more for the love of it. So if you're spending time with people who are intrinsically motivated, you're going to feel much more likely to be intrinsically motivated. And that intrinsic motivation is really, really important, for that success. So we really want to make sure we're looking at the people we're spending our time with. You want to surround yourself with people that motivate you and challenge you and support you. It's also, when it comes to peak performance, people being at their best, lots of studies have shown that people who are at their best understand that they need to lean into their strengths daily. So they focus on the things that they're good at, not their weaknesses. So they're not thinking, how can I improve on these areas of weakness? They're actually looking at what can I do to make my strengths even stronger, to make them even better. So when people lean into their strengths daily, they're 6 times more likely to be engaged in their job, 6 times more likely to strongly agree they've got the opportunity to do what they want to do or what they do best every day, and 3 times more likely to report having an excellent quality of life. And of course, this is what we all want to do. So I want you to now think about, what are some of your strengths? Maybe you've already done a strengths questionnaire. For example, there are companies like Gallup that will offer those strengths questionnaires. There are lots of free strengths questionnaires that you can do online. But if you haven't, I want you to think about, what are some of your strengths? So if I were to ask you now, what are 3 strengths that you have? Think about that. Think about, what are some of the things that people come to you for? What are some of the things that people say, you're really good at this? What are some of the things you really enjoy doing? What are some of the things that you yearn to do? Because it's likely that those things are your strengths. And to ask yourself, how can you do more of that on a daily basis? Because our strengths are only our strengths if we're practicing them and if we're leaning into them on a daily basis. So the best definitely lean into their strengths on a daily basis. So we'll go on to the next slide. Thank you. Another thing that's incredibly important, it's all about harnessing the power of your purpose to break through the limits. So when we talk about the power of purpose, it's looking at the reason for doing something that is above and beyond yourself. So there's so many studies that have shown that if we have to do something for someone else, we're much more likely to do that, and we do it in a much better way. We perform much higher than if we're doing it for, a reward such as, to actually just do it. So if there's a competition, for example. So tapping into that higher sense of purpose is really, really important. That's the thing that's going to help you to break through those limitations. If we look at it on the reverse, if we don't do things, if we don't have a higher purpose, if we're doing things just for ourselves, then actually what happens is our ego will often get in the way. So we think about the ego as the central governor, and it will sometimes prevent us from breaking through that comfort zone, from doing stuff that throws us out into the uncomfortable areas as such. So, for example, if we look at somebody who might be, doing an ultra marathon, they're doing things that is actually really causing them quite a bit of considerable pain. So what is it that helps them to actually break through that pain? It's because they've let go of their ego. They're bypassing it because they've got a higher sense of purpose. So they're doing it for someone or for something else. And that also helps to keep us motivated. So, for example, they did a study and they found that they went into hospitals and they told janitors that their work was not just about cleaning things up. It wasn't just about, doing the cleaning and having everything in place where it should be. It was actually to do with the fact that by cleaning, by making sure that they're getting rid of that bacteria, they're actually reducing the chances of vulnerable population, people who are in hospital, of picking up infections. So they were actually helping to save lives. They were helping to improve their health. And when they reframed that, when they gave them that higher sense of purpose, so they were actually doing their job for someone else, their performance went through the roof, and also their enjoyment in terms of their job really improved as well. So it's really about asking yourself, with your role, with what you're doing on a daily basis, how can you actually, increase that higher sense of purpose? You're unraveling and uncovering your compelling why, asking yourself why you're doing something. So when we start to do something, that isn't for ourselves, when we let go of ourselves and our ego, we actually start to perform at a much, much higher level. On to the next slide. So talking of that, so this is just looking at the last couple of slides. These are really, really very important slides where we want to develop that purpose statement. So when I spoke about purpose, it's something that's giving us that higher reason for doing something. It's going to increase motivation. It's going to help you to perform at a much higher level. And this is what peak performers do. They're doing something above and beyond themselves. So we want to develop a purpose statement. This is something that can be anywhere from 1 to 3 lines. But the first step in developing that purpose statement is actually looking at your core values. So I want you to think now, what are some of your core values? So your core values, these are your non-negotiable standards of behavior. Those are going to be the things that, are important to you in your life. So for example, it could be things like, relationships, trust, honesty, joy, fairness, whatever it might be to you. So I want you to now take a moment and think about, what are some of your core values? Because it's really good if we can get maybe, a list of 3 to 5 core values. So maybe just take a moment to think about a few of those now. And then in order for us to be able to develop that purpose statement, we want to be able to personalize those values. So I'll give you an example of how we can do that. So for myself, some of my core values would be things like joy, growth, relationships, kindness, freedom. And if I look at how I can personalize some of those values, if we take joy, it's, I want to be able to have fun in what I'm doing. And I enjoy passing on knowledge, but it's doing that in a way that I find fun and enjoying the process. So you're personalizing that value. We then want to, once you've gone through that, and by the way, of course, we don't have time to necessarily go through all of these steps today. And this also is a sort of work. It really takes quite a bit of reflection. This is a time for, maybe take a screenshot of this. This is going to be really good for you to be able to, whether you do it, straight after this presentation or something that you look at over the next couple of days, but do it when it's still quite fresh in your mind. Identify, some of your core values and personalize them so that you can really think about your purpose statement. So it's going to take a bit of time. This purpose statement is something that you're going to really hold on to and carry with you and think about every day, because you want to have it as integrated into your life so that it really drives you in order to be that peak performer. So you've personalized your values. Then we want to rank them in order of importance. So once you've ranked them in order of importance, so what's your top value? For me, as I said, it's joy. My second one would be growth. So think about what what's the order of importance for you? And then from that, work on developing that statement, 1 to 3 sentences, something that's going to help really drive you. So once you've developed that purpose statement, this is when we need to harness the power of the purpose statement. So you can do this in a few ways. So a couple of tips. We want to have those visual cues. It's really, really important. So you want to be seeing that purpose statement on a daily basis. For example, I would highly recommend that you write out your purpose statement and you put it on your bathroom mirror. So every morning when you wake up, as you're brushing your teeth, you're reading that purpose statement. It's really going to get it into your cells as such, get it to the core. Also, particularly if it's a work-related purpose statement, you might want to have that near your laptop, so that you're looking at it on a daily basis, and it really helps to drive you. If it's a sports performance related purpose statement, maybe this is something that you put by your gym bag. Maybe you put it, near the drawer of where you keep your gym kit. If you're using a piece of equipment like a bike, you can put it across the handlebars. But put it somewhere where you're visually going to see it and be reminded of it on a daily basis. Also, it's good when you've got it in the mirror so you can see it before you go to bed at night. The next thing that we want to look at is that self-talk. You know, if you remember from the presentation that I did last week, we spoke about the importance of our thoughts and how our thoughts affect our feelings or our emotions, and they're going to affect our actions, and that's then going to affect our behaviors and our outcomes. So it all starts with the quality of your thoughts. So we want to make sure, as part of our self-talk, we're tapping into that purpose statement. So perhaps your purpose statement, because it's going to be anywhere from 1 to 3 sentences, that's probably quite long for you to be saying to yourself, although you can. But what you might want to do is create a mantra. So this is a shorter, sharper sort of like statement that helps to remind you of your purpose. And you can just start to tell yourself this throughout the day. Also, it's really good to use if you're feeling a bit challenged in terms of the work that you're doing, to remind yourself, okay, this is my purpose. It's beyond just me. It's for a higher reason. So I'll give you an example. You know, if I look at sort of a lot of my purpose is around spreading knowledge and helping others to become better versions of themselves. So, you know, a good thing that I can say to myself is spreading knowledge to help others. That's a mantra that I use. You know, I used it earlier on today before doing this talk. So create that mantra. It's really going to have a massive impact on your emotions and your behaviors and your outcomes and your performance. And then we also want to have that nightly reflection. This is so important for you to actually be able to check in on yourself. So before you go to bed at night, you know, and there's a few different practices that you can do before you go into bed at night. Things like a gratitude journal is also really good. What are 3 things you're grateful for? But in terms of your purpose statement, I really want you to start thinking about and asking yourself the question, looking at a purpose statement, how aligned was what I did today? How aligned was that with my purpose? And you can rate yourself from 0 being not at all up to 10. And this is also a really good time for you to actually write this down, because when we write things down, it goes deeper within us, and it actually means that we're more likely to, you know, to sort of do the things that we say we're going to do the next day. It increases that. So reflect. What went well for me today in terms of my purpose? What could be better? That nightly reflection is really, really important. So, you know, a lot of this talk is about becoming our best self, designing a winning day, looking at designing a winning week. And some of the slides that I've spoken about are helping with that. So when we're looking at designing a winning week, we want to make sure that we have in our site, and here, by the way, this is another thing you might want to take a screenshot of as well. It's going to be something, you know, you're not necessarily going to be able to fill out now within this session. We have limited time, but for you to go away and think about this. So when you have that template for your winning week, you want to make sure at the top of your template, you've got your purpose statement. So I'll read mine now for you. It's to continue gathering and sharing knowledge so I can help others unleash their potential, live a happy and healthy life, and have fun doing it. So for you to create your own specific purpose statement and to have it at the top as a reminder of your winning week. So create this template. And then down the right-hand side, we have some of the things that I've spoken about in this presentation. And there, your purpose statement and what you've got down the right-hand side, your rituals, your strengths, your areas of priority, and your values, they're pretty much going to remain the same. So if we're looking at, you know, your rituals, what are your top 5 rituals for success? The 5 things that you need to do on a daily basis to help you to get into that state of peak performance. So we're looking at, you know, those morning rituals. It could even be like getting to bed earlier, getting up earlier, meditation, exercise. Remember that pyramid of performance where everything starts with having our physical well-being in check. And that helps us with the other areas, you know, of our energy, the way we get those well springs of energy. So get the for you rituals in place. Then we want to look at our strengths. Because we want to tap into those on a daily basis. So whether, you know, I mentioned before for you to start thinking about what some of your strengths are, or you can do an online quiz. It's going to be a questionnaire, which is going to be, you know, you can do free ones. You can pay for a more extensive one, but you can do free ones. So get your strengths, tap into those daily. Your priority areas, this is important because we really, life is all about balance. It's not just about working hard, on your work and your career. Of course, we want to do that, but we need to be tapping into those different areas of life in order for us to be healthy, whole, human beings, so that we can be our best, that we have that energy. So priority areas, what are your priority areas? It can be things like self-development, family, it might be the relationship you have with your partner, with your children. It could be nutrition, exercise, finances, whatever it is, find your 5 priority areas, and then also look at your top values. So essentially that purpose statement and that right-hand column, that kind of remains the same. So then when you're designing your winning week, you really want to make sure you've got at least your 3 goals that you've set in place for that week. And I would recommend as well, when you're designing the winning week, this is something you do on a Saturday evening. For those of you who with Sunday as the first day of the week, if Monday is, then you do it on a Sunday night, or maybe it's something you do on a Sunday morning, or a Monday morning, but you want to do it at the very beginning of the week so you can plan your week. So you put your 3 different goals in place for the week, and you want to make sure that those goals are across different areas. So a work-related goal, and then there could be something to do with another one of your priority areas. So maybe it's something to do with family. So for example, I've put one of my goals, finishing a report, something could do, another goal to do with relationships, could be to reconnect with people, schedule some, Skype calls or Zoom calls, whatever it might be, with some friends. And then another goal could be a physical goal. So we're tapping into those different areas of well-being. So once you have your goals in place, you need to then ask yourself, how do I need to then plan my week? So putting smaller goals in place, those steps are going to help you to achieve those 3 larger goals. So you can put in certain things for different days of the week. So this is just a template. This gives you a bit of an idea. I've obviously only put in 3 days there because there wasn't that much room on the slide, but it can give you an idea how we can design the winning week. In order for you to be a peak performer, it's really important that we're doing things like, knowing your purpose, living by your values, and identifying, your strengths-based goals, and then prioritizing those goals. And then something that's really important is that, you have that self-reflection. So each day, at the end of the day, you look at the goals that you put in for that day, the smaller goals to get you towards achieving the larger goals. And you actually ask yourself, how well did that go? That daily review. Because actually that self-reflection is really the only way of thinking that's going to lead to learning. So it's really important that we reflect. So that sort of brings us to the end of the slides. We're going to have a Q&A afterwards, but some key takeaways. We want to, from today's presentation, we want to maintain high performance in stressful environments. If we're going to do that, we have to make sure we're nourishing the different areas of our life. We're feeding into those 4 different, energy well springs, the body, the emotions, the mind, and the spirit. And also to remember that peak performers, it's not about being consistently great, but being great at being consistent. Remember, consistency is the mother of mastery. So keep on doing things on a regular basis, turning up even when you feel you don't want to. Work in alignment as much as you can with your chronotype. So if you can plan your day, if you're someone who, is a bit more of a night owl, then look at doing the more creative tasks earlier on in the day and things that take more deeper concentration, that deep focus later on, and vice versa for the larks. Focus on your strengths in order to be a peak performer. What is it that you're good at? And make sure you're feeding into that, leaning into that on a daily basis. And of course, we want to really, live your values. Your values are so important. If we're not living by our values, by the way, our life just doesn't feel like it's very good. So making sure, we're going to feel just a bit, life isn't as we want it to be. So focusing on those values and asking, yourself, what is your compelling why? And that's going to help you. So uncovering, finding out your purpose, that's going to help you to turn up and do the work even when you feel like you don't want to. And that's going to help you to be that peak performer. So thank you very much. That's the end of the presentation. I would now like to introduce you to my colleague, Alison.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alison Sharp. I look after corporate client management for the Middle East. We are still taking questions. If you have any, you can type them in the chat box in the live comments at the right-hand side of the screen. So let's go ahead and move into the Q&A. Hi, Victoria.
Hello, Alison. Good to see you.
Lots of really useful information. I'm going to go straight into one of the questions that we received. Sure. I find it hard to focus on one task as I'm a working mum and working from home. If I don't multitask, it will be very hard to complete my daily tasks. What are your personal recommendations?
And, you know, like they say, women are, you know, much better at multitasking, particularly sort of mothers. So it's, of course, you've got to work with your environment and with your circumstances, particularly as we're working from home at the moment. It is a bit more of a challenge. But for example, even, you know, that, like I sort of mentioned, removing your phone. So, and maybe this is something, maybe the Pomodoro effect, because then we only need that shorter period of time, those 25 minutes where we're really having that deep focus. But the fewer distractions that you can have, it's that whole idea of working smart. We get more done. So even if this lady isn't able to, you know, completely focus, and, you know, if she needs to, of course, she's got her child at home, but it's actually just looking at, you know, removing some of the other distractions. So for example, things like emails, social media, for us to just check those things maybe twice a day, you know, and for example, that in the middle of the day is a really important time where we can actually do those more administrative tasks. So it's just sort of planning your day as best you can and looking at, again, your chronotype. But yeah, if you can remove your phone, as I mentioned, they did a study, it causes that brain drain. So we just don't perform as well in our tasks. So removing as much of those distractions as you possibly can is going to be beneficial in working smart.
And can you change your chronotypes? I noticed you talked a lot about your early bird, your third lark, and your night owl. Is that something that you can change, or is that just inbuilt into you?
So that's a good question. Those people, the 2/3 of the population who are in the middle, they can change. The early bird and the night owl, they are genetically predisposed to being, you know, the night owl or the early bird. So it's going to be really difficult for them to change. But those people in the middle, definitely. So I would say I identify with, you know, the sort of the third bird, where there was a stage in my life, mainly when I was at university, where I was going to bed really late. So I was not a morning person. I did not want to wake up early, and I would do my better tasks later on in the day. When I started to change my lifestyle, I've now turned into that early bird. So that's when my deep focus, I make sure I do, you know, my hardest work, my most important work in the morning. So it's about, before you sort of, you know, confirm your chronotype, ask yourself, are some of your lifestyle factors actually affecting, you know, whether you're a morning person or an evening person? So if you're consistently going to bed after midnight and you're kind of, you know, watching things like Netflix or whatever it might be, scrolling through social media, that's going to affect your ability to sleep. So you're confusing yourself in terms of your chronotype. And coffee as well is something that is going to confuse us in terms of what our chronotype is.
You mentioned on the last call, you have your last coffee at something like 8 a.m. Is that right? Is that what you said last time?
Yeah.
That's really early. So I have one in the morning, and then I try not to have, I have one more, but I try not to have it after 1 p.m. Do you think 1 p.m. is still too late?
No, I think, and like with all of, you know, what I've spoken about in the last couple of presentations, it's all about finding what works for you. So I've actually done a genetic test where genetically I can break down caffeine, is what it says. But when I have coffee, I get so jittery. And if I had to have a coffee at 1 o'clock, I would not be able to sleep, and maybe even that night. But certainly, you know, I wouldn't, my quality of sleep would be really, really affected. And also I've got to add, Alison, the coffee that I have, it's a mushroom coffee. So it's got about the same amount of caffeine as green tea. So even a cup of tea, you know, that really, really affects me. So I just have to do it early on. So everyone's different. Interestingly, when I go on holiday, I'm able to process caffeine a lot better. So there is another thing to do with stress and our body's ability to metabolize caffeine. So it's something for you to think about. You know, if you're finding yourself a bit jittery, if you're not sleeping very well, then look at your caffeine intake and just sort of look at reducing it. Maybe swapping over to the mushroom coffee, where it still tastes like coffee, but it's got also some mushroom extracts in it, which really helps switch on our brain. Also great for the immune system, which is good for now, but helps switch on our brain and enhance focus.
I've never even seen mushroom coffee in any shop. Where do you actually
So it's not very easy to come by, but you can get it on iHerb, or for those people in Dubai, Wild and the Moon sells it. But otherwise, iHerb delivers for anyone that gets iHerb to deliver, and it's much more reasonably priced if you're buying it on iHerb as well. But it's really good, as I say, to enhance that focus and to get a bit of an immune boost during this time as well.
Okay. Another question that's come in is, what tools can I use to know what my strengths are?
Excellent question. So the best way to do this is really to go and do an online questionnaire. So, for example, there's a company, Gallup's, do their Strength Finder, which is really good. That's what I did to find mine. But there are quite a few different websites that will help you to identify your strengths. That's the best practice, because often if we are trying to figure out our own strengths, even though like some of these questions I asked, what do people come to you for? What do you yearn to do? What do you really enjoy doing? Often that helps identify your strengths. But sometimes it's not actually our top strengths that when we're just asking ourselves the question. So if you can do a questionnaire, it's definitely going to be the best way to identify those strengths. And remember, they're only your strengths if you're leaning into them, if you're doing something with them. And once we start to, tap into our strengths, life just, life's so much more enjoyable. Like you saw in those statistics there, but when we start to do things that we're good at, because if you think about it, your strengths are kind of like the traits within you that are kind of almost predetermined. So if you go and do a strengths questionnaire, you'll be really surprised when you read those strengths. They have you to a T. So when they do the description, you sort of go like, wow, how do they know that? So definitely highly recommend doing it. It was a game changer for me, and then once you identify it, ask yourself, what can I do on a daily basis to lean into those strengths?
Okay. Claire has asked, what is the most stressful part about working at peak performance?
The most stressful part. So the idea about peak performance is that the stressful part is you pushing yourself, but because there's that, you're sort of like feeding into all of those different areas of well-being, those different energy sources, those well springs. It's kind of that almost exciting, and like I spoke about in the previous presentation, that feeling of I'm excited to do this. So for example, today I'm excited to do this presentation. Don't get me wrong, there's that level of stress, there's that level of the heart's starting to beat a bit faster, particularly when I first start, but it's that idea of reframing that stress into something that actually is a good thing. So it's looking at I'm pushing those boundaries, it's those just manageable tasks, going beyond what I thought I could. Because once we start to break through that comfort zone, we just start to achieve more and more and more. So it's that growth equation again, when it comes to peak performance, manageable amounts of stress and prioritizing that rest. Without that rest, that's when you're no longer at that peak performance. You're not growing, and we start to feel burnt out and anxious and really sort of like stressed. So it's kind of looking at the stressful part of peak performance is the part that it just helps us to grow.
It sounds like a fine balance.
There has to be that balance, you know, and that's where our rituals, our routines, those are the things. Like rituals are the holy grail of bringing balance into your life, you know. So that's where without those rituals, we can really go off kilter, and then we just, you know, get to that point. And I'm sure a lot of us, me included, you know, I'm certainly by no means perfect, but we, you know, during lockdown where everything was shaken up a little bit and early stages, I didn't have my rituals in place, and it had a massive knock-on effect in terms of my emotional well-being, how well I was able to focus, and then of course how aligned I was able to be with my sense of purpose. You know, that higher reason, that thing that's going to drive me. So yeah, it's all about balance.
The next question we have is from Dragana. When I plan my day, I'm always overly optimistic. Any advice to keep my daily schedule realistic when you want to achieve a lot?
Absolutely. So it's about making sure, you know, those productivity hacks, when you are doing things, you're taking those breaks. And I would say it's, you know, because I've had clients who do this, they create a ridiculously long to-do list. And because it's great, by the way, to have a to-do list. We all need that. But maybe you've got your top 3 like must priority areas that you need to get done in that day, and then you've got sort of like the 6 kind of like lower things that you need to do. And I would say prioritizing your goals. So you prioritize your goals for the week, but prioritize your goals for the day. And if there are some things that it doesn't necessarily need to be done in that day, it's okay if it doesn't get done. You know, there's a really good productivity hack, I should call it. A guy called Brian Tracy, he wrote a book and created an idea of eat that frog. I don't know if you've heard of that, Alison, eat that frog.
No, I have not.
Yeah. It sounds quite weird, but it's not as weird as it sounds. We don't have to eat any frogs, thankfully, whilst doing it. So the idea is that it's to help us with avoid procrastination. And it's the idea of, if the worst thing you need to do that day is to eat a frog, then eat that frog. You do that first of all. So for the lady who asked that question, get your worst task, but the task is the worst one, but the one that has to be done. Get that out of the way first. Then we're not procrastinating. And with procrastination, you know, that thing that we need to do, it doesn't go away. It's always there. So it just causes us to feel a bit stressed, and we don't perform at our best. And also, once we've done it, we feel that great sense of achievement. So we've got our first win of the day. Yes, so eat that frog.
I'm going to remember that one. What are your thoughts on increasing productivity when working from home, especially when we're working around the clock? So again, it's related to the previous one, but I think that Dubai is a very high-paced environment. A lot is expected of every individual, and no matter what role that you do. So what would be your recommendations of increasing productivity? I know you've kind of talked a lot about them, but what would you recommend as a starting point?
I think another, and going, you know, looking at the fact that a lot of people, including myself, are working from home, is that your environment really matters. So creating a sacred working space and only doing your work in that space is going to be really important. It helps when we go to that place, and we're even using the same materials, so using the same laptop, which I'm sure all of us do, but if you're having to write stuff, like using the same materials, it helps connect neural connections in your brain with your environment and what you're actually doing, so your productivity increases. What we don't want to be doing is taking our laptop, you know, to the sofa, or even worse, I don't know, I'm pointing over there because the sofa's not even over there, but anyway, we're taking it to the sofa, or the worst thing that you can do is bringing your laptop into the bedroom, because then we're associating the bedroom as a place that we do work, and that's going to affect your sleep. So it's really having that sacred space. That's going to help with productivity, creating those buffer zones. At least, you know, if you can have an hour, you know, maybe that's not realistic for everyone, but if you can have 20 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is in the morning, and you want at least an hour before going to bed where it's another buffer zone where you're not doing that work, because otherwise it's going to that's going to affect your overall performance, because you're not going to sleep well, then you're not going to have the energy for the next day, and you enter into that cycle of needing caffeine, having your highs, having your lows, and we just don't perform as well as we should. So yeah, really look at, just having those rituals in place as well is going to be really, really important.
Okay. If we didn't get to your question, we will be making sure that Victoria does answer them on the platform, but there's one more I would like to cover.
Sure. Oh, I think we've lost Alison. I think I'm still on, but I can't, unfortunately, I can't see the questions. But anything that we don't cover, for whatever reason, I definitely will be able to reply. I'll do that later on today. So yeah, please do put in any questions that you might have. More than happy to answer those. I'll get back to you before the end of the day. So I'm just checking what's happened. Okay, so I think we're probably going to have to just end with a thank you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for all of your questions. It's really good to have you guys on board. Any more questions, I definitely will reply to you, but have a great day ahead. And remember, those rituals, like your values, it's all going to help you to become a much better more functioning person, and to get to that peak performance. Also, there's going to be a survey that will be sent out for your feedback, so any feedback you have would be much appreciated. But thank you so much, and have a great day ahead. And the next session is going to be on the 25th of June, so look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care and have a great day ahead. Bye bye.